Michelle, we are on season 3, episode 3. I said this at the top of last episode. We had watched 4 movies in a week, and now we're up to 6 movies in a month.
My
I don't know
head's
about
spinning.
you. I am exhausted.
Same.
I watched both of these movies this morning because I had an extremely early call, so I actually got to watch them before work, which is great, but I'm tired. I didn't know that movie marathons could tire me out, but it succeeded. Michelle, why did we pick these 2 movies as a matchup?
Last week, we had 2 love triangle stories, and we're doing it again this week, but in a different way. There's also the era, most of the Notebook takes place in the 40s, and obviously Casablanca takes place in the 40s as well. So we knew that we had that overlap. Do you have
Yeah,
any other commonalities that you found in rewatching these?
both of the female protagonists in this movie are just very classy in nature. Very different people, very different characters, but I couldn't look away from their charisma in both of these movies. So I felt like that was a common thread. But the main commonality that I definitely found was between the third in each of
Yeah.
these triangles, because I would say they're more so difficult to hate and difficult for us to not be rooting for. I found myself not really rooting for either party. I felt myself more so rooting for the female focal point in each of these to make the decision that they wanted.
Why don't we start by sharing our background with these movies? Because I feel like we kind of like have a flip flop on them.
Yeah, The Notebook I have seen probably more times than any movie. I just it came out I think when I was in what year did this movie come out? 2004.
This is definitely the kind of movie that you watched at a young age, but if it had come out 10 years prior when I was 11, I would not have been allowed to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really the thing is I don't remember watching it. I don't remember it coming out. I was 10. I don't remember. I definitely didn't go see this in the movies. I think because it had such a cultural impact on my age group, like it was Nicholas Sparks was really just well known for love story readers. So I think I knew his name, and I've seen some of the other movies that ended up coming out based on his books. But this is just a movie that I've watched over and over again throughout me growing up. In high school and middle school, I would come home from school, and this is when we just had cable TV. So whatever was just kind of on the movie channels, that's what I was rewatching. And Casablanca, completely different. I saw it for the first time actually when I was visiting you, Michelle, in Florida. I think it was last year,
Like a year ago.
maybe
Yeah.
the year before. And so this is really the only second time I watched it. And I watched it by myself. And I would feel like I was paying more attention the first time I saw it, but I liked it better this time watching it than the first time I saw it. And probably because there's a lot of historical points in the movie and a lot of things that you need to understand of how everything comes together. So I think I just understood the backstory more and what was going on, especially with Victor Laszlo, who's such an important character in that movie. But
You mentioned Nicholas Sparks. I'm pretty sure that I read The Notebook before I watched the movie, but I'm kind of a bit of a contrarian. So if everyone's saying you have to watch this movie, I'm typically going to like question it or say, okay, well, if everyone likes it, I probably won't like it. So I kind of went into watching the movie with that kind of attitude. It was okay, but it wasn't this like masterpiece that everyone is saying that it is. I'm going to hold off on sharing what I thought in rewatching it for the what did we hate section
oh
because
my
I have
God,
so many things to say.
I am so upset.
I'm
I am
sorry.
so upset by
I
this.
hated this movie.
Oh my God. I can't even look at you right now. I can't. This is not something I can accept. Absolutely not.
There's so many things I found
I know
problematic.
why, because you love James
Marsden.
Morrison, and you were rooting for him. I think that's why you hated it.
How did you know that I liked him?
You're you're very predictable. It's not really hard. He's just like a classic, like handsome guy that everyone
Liking
loves.
classic handsome guys, that's my thing.
Yes, 100% is. Don't try and act like it's not.
Casablanca, I watched for the first time maybe like 10 years ago. And I remember I watched it by myself. And it was one of those, I consider, we have a movie podcast. I consider myself to be pretty well rounded when it comes to movies. And I think I felt very much like I graduated somehow when I finally watched this. And I remember liking it, but I remember in the same way that you said that you liked it better the second time. I think when I watched it with Jimmy, and then he really liked it immediately. And then we've watched it a bunch together since then, including when we watched it with you, Laura, you and Dom. I think one of the things that is really appealing to me, maybe I should just save that for what do we like? Yeah.
Can't even look at you right now. I still
Here's
can't. I'm fuming right now. I'm going to make it my mission by the rest of this 40 minutes to change your mind about this movie.
it's my mission to convince you that The Notebook is a terrible movie.
Okay?
It's
Challenge
on.
accepted. Okay, so let's talk about what we liked, what worked. Let's start with Casablanca since that's an easier feat for you.
I think the number one thing that I like about Casablanca is that it's considered to be a romantic story, but it's not quintessentially a rom com. And I would go as far as to say is that it's not a movie that I think would be generally appealing to a female demographic.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people who are more interested in wartime films, this is a good pick for them. I think that's why Jimmy is so attracted to this movie. I know we picked this as a Valentine's Day movie because it's just a Hollywood classic, but I wouldn't categorize this as a rom-com.
Yeah, definitely not a rom com. And I don't want to say barely a love story because a love story is central to like a lot of the decisions that were made in the plot, but I think I like that it kind of falls on the outskirts of that category. And it's probably one of the same reasons that I'm anti the Notebook is that I think the whole idea of like Nicholas Sparks stories are so formulaic. I don't like when someone presents something to me in a way that says, this is what this is and this is how you will feel. I like to discover that on my own. And I like that Casablanca gives you that kind of experience. But I also, if we can start our Victor Laszlo love fest, he's like one of my favorite characters of all time. If you're setting up a love triangle and saying like, here's the guy and here's the girl and here's the problem, he's so not a problem. And in fact, you really find yourself rooting for him. And every time that I watch this, I feel more strongly about that. And what makes it better is that it's not that I feel strongly about it from just looking at it from like a romantic perspective, like, oh, he's a good match for Ilsa, but he's also just a really good man and a really good human. So, I mean, and Rick's character is as well in his own way, but yeah, big Victor Laszlo fan.
So what you're saying is you love the classic Hollywood handsome man in this film as well.
Damn
I'm
it.
just throwing it out there. Michelle has a type, and it's being established.
It is a factor.
He is. I mean, he's a
He's very
good-looking
handsome.
man. I think because I needed to watch this again and really just dive a little bit more into the story and put myself kind of in Ilsa's perspective a little bit more. It's such an interesting storyline because you ask yourself, what would you do if you were in her shoes? What is the right decision? I mean, she's thrown into these catastrophic events and really intense decisions that she needs to make, but I found myself just rooting for her and finding peace in whatever decision she made, even though Rick was kind of the one to make the right decision for her. I think it was out of love for him to make that decision for her, but I really liked the character development of Rick from start to finish. And I think one thing that worked really well, which I think was symbolized in one of the opening scenes, where everyone is talking about this big personality Rick, but you're not actually seeing him. And we're introduced to him and he's playing chess. And I feel like the entire movie is just a chess game. It's just waiting for people to make certain moves, whether it's reflective of their character or not reflective of their character. And I think they did a really, really great job of carrying that throughout, and specifically for Rick, because they keep referring to him as a neutral party when it's very obvious that he's actually a good person. He's cynical, but he cares. And I think what had kind of put him in this even more cynical than probably who he was before Paris was losing the one person that he loved the most. It kind of broke him. It kind of turned him into this spiral to say, like, I'm not helping anyone. I'm just trying to run my bar and everyone else leave me alone. And just being able to see it slowly unravel with situations he's faced with. And I think one of like the most tender moments of the film doesn't even have to do with Ilsa and Laszlo, but the Bulgarian couple that he ends up helping. And that was kind of like the first, I would say, stake in the sand of him to start really changing and taking the quote unquote right side. All three of these characters are so complex in their own ways that I don't think there's one like lead horse. I think that all three of them work so well together and individually.
From a writing perspective, it's more challenging to tell an interesting story that takes place in a really short amount of time. And this story is so compelling. And I get, it's in the middle of a war. It was made in the middle of a war. So, it kind of comes with built in drama. But I think they did a really good job of setting up the story. And Laura, as you said, I can't agree with you more that I think the best kind of movies put you in the perspective of the characters and make you ask those questions like, what would I do in this situation? Because this is a really tough situation to be in. And I think that all of the characters in this movie were faced with decisions that maybe there was a right and maybe there was a wrong, but there was always going to be a consequence and something that they had to sacrifice to get what they wanted. And yeah, I think that no film does this better than Casablanca.
The stakes are so high in every single scene. And people always talked about this movie and how important it is in film history. And now that I've seen it twice for it to really sink in, I get it. I get the importance of it. And I think it's just really different from other movies in its genre that it stands out on its own.
Who should go first in talking about The Notebook?
I'll go first.
Okay.
A majority of this film takes place in the past, and it's showing Allie and Noah's journey, how they fell in love, this summer of romance, and I always just wanted more scenes of that. But as I've gotten older, I get so emotional with them being in a nursing home. Like I can't hold it together. And I think it's because I never really loved the actors. I just think it's a really beautiful and tender story about life and growing old together. And I totally hear you, what you're saying about something telling you how to feel. But I also think that there's such a humanness in showing the inception of a couple and being free spirited, not having any worries, not thinking about consequences, then getting to a point where you are an adult and you have more responsibilities and you're trying to make the best decision for others, but you're also trying to think about yourself and your own desires, and then leading to being older and just coming to the end of your life and looking back on all of these really sad but also really wonderful experiences you've had throughout. And I don't know that the movie would have been as strong without Duke telling this story and really like showing where they are today and showing how much one person can care for someone to the very end. I think they're different people, but our grandparents in the past couple of years have been in assisted living. Our grandmother, recently died last year, and I just kind of see our grandfather in that he really cared for her. They grew up during the same time period, so I was able to kind of like picture them young and falling in love. He was in the Navy, so I feel like that kind of just strikes home for me a little bit more. But he really cared for her kind of into his last days, and I think it just shows the strength of a relationship and a partner and being able to kind of look back on this whole wonderful life you had together. How am I doing so far, Michelle? Am I convincing you?
You had to go like straight, pull the grandparent card.
I'm really pulling out my good cards in the beginning. I gotta pull you in somehow. I think beyond that, I'm a big Ryan Gosling fan. I love Rachel McAdams. There are things that definitely irk me a little bit about her in certain parts of this movie, and we can get into that in the next section. But I definitely believe their chemistry. Their passion can be a little bit problematic at times, but they were the right choices. Anything good that you have to say?
There are some good parts. To start, I love this era. So everything that they're wearing, I'm in love with. All the places that they showcase. I love, now that I live in the South, I have very much have like an appreciation for the landscape, for the homes. I agree with you. I think that whole falling in love with someone over a summer, that concept is appealing to me. I always enjoy stories that are kind of centered around that. I think they had some good adventures. And my favorite was when she shows up at his house at 10 o'clock at night with her painting, and they're sitting on the porch and reading poetry with his dad, who is, I think, one of the best characters in the movie. I wish that there was more of them.
There's so much tenderness in that scene because as Allie's character is portrayed, she has a very structured life, and the simplicity of writing in a concept of eating breakfast at 10 p.m. and having pancakes is so foreign to her, yet she's so down. And I couldn't agree more with you. I love the dad. I think that scene is so magical and so special.
Sitting on the porch in the summer at night and like just reading or having a conversation with someone, there's something about it that is so like cozy and that feels so honest.
It's those aspects of the movie that end up making it special, that you're able to kind of sprinkle in these side characters.
Speaking of side characters, I don't know if you would consider her to be a side character or not, but I love Joan Allen, who plays Allie, Rachel McAdams' mom. I I was laughing because they used to have a category, I think, on the rewatchables that was like the person who is acting like they're in a completely different movie than everyone else. And that's kind of how I saw Joan Allen in this movie. And I'm saying that this in a good way. I think that she is just in a different class when it comes to acting. And I thought that she was phenomenal in all the scenes that she was in. I wasn't completely taking everyone seriously, but I took her seriously.
Not that this is one of my favorite scenes, but a scene that I feel like is so explosive is when she comes home at 2 a.m. and she's freaking out on her in the office. And I actually love Ryan Gosling's part the most in that moment because you're trying so hard to think about everything that's going through his head. He's sitting out there, clearly very nervous, but he starts smiling. Like you're unsure if he thinks that this whole situation is ridiculous and funny. And then we just completely shatter him because she calls him trash 4 times at the top of her lungs. But she is so believable in that scene of like, I know what's best for you, and I'm trying to, which we learn later, avoid you potentially making the same mistakes I almost did. And I have this vision in this life for you. And to be able to see, talk about character transformation, but it's not like we love her by the end because she stole those fucking letters, but she really had like a big redeeming moment at the end that and I thought that that scene was so powerful when she drives her to the lumber yard and they're having that conversation and she says like, this is important, like please listen to me, and letting the protagonist make the right decision that was right for her and not anyone else's decisions, which I also felt like was kind of ahead of its time because most parents back then would not have even breathed an ounce of air to give their kids a decision. Is there anything else that you liked? Is there anything else that I could potentially
let me see my list.
You? What about the inclusion of them going to the movies on their first date?
Yeah, I liked that.
And yeah, at the American where we went when we went on our Charleston trip, we have photos of it, of the theater.
I forgot about that.
There's some more tender connections that you didn't know that you had.
And I know that I talked about him a little bit in the beginning, but I also really liked Lon as a character. I think that they could have written him to just be a complete jerk. And he was extremely reasonable. And I don't feel like he was a pushover. I mean, he expressed his feelings. He was put in kind of like a bad position when she broke up with him. And I thought that he handled it well. And yes, I do think that he is just a very classically handsome man.
Absolutely. We're not in the next section yet, but I already know the first thing that you hate. And I'm so excited. So I think this is a good segue. Okay. Let's start with the Notebook since we're already in the topic. Why don't we play a little game? I'm going to predict all the things that Michelle hates about this movie.
Okay.
Number 1, the transformation of Noah from clean-cut Noah to disheveled Noah in the second half of the movie. I have to say the baggy pants are a no for me. Another thing which I 100% know bothers you because it doesn't bother me as much, but the fact that we know they don't shower for like 3 days
I didn't even consider that
love affair, and she's just in that red blanket. You can't take away the rest of the movie that they are dressed and so put together like most of the movie. Even Duke and old Allie or Dementia Allie and her in her red pantsuit that she's wearing. She's crushing it. She looks amazing.
She's beautiful.
She's so classy. They look amazing 90% of the movie. So don't let Noah's tough times and his aviator days deter you from how wonderful he was trying in the rest of the movie.
Okay. You're not wrong. However, my very first note within the first 5 minutes of the movie was just, I hate Noah. And it has much more to do with his actions than his looks. In no world would I find it attractive, appealing to have a guy ask me out on a date in the way that he asked Allie out on a date. It stressed me out. Him obviously doing his little climbing up the Ferris wheel and hanging there and kind of like forcing her into saying yes. I really hated the way that he first fell in love with her, the way that he was like first attracted to her. They very much played it off as like love at first sight. And for me, love at first sight feels so empty. So the concept is you fall in love with someone purely because you like what you're seeing on the exterior when you know nothing about them. And that's all he was going on. And then basically from there, it was him convincing her to go out with him and partaking in other dangerous scenarios like lying in the street, which I also did not find charming at all. Ryan Gosling is like, I guess he's good looking, but I don't know. He doesn't do it for me.
So he is the reason you don't like this movie.
He's a big part of why I don't like this movie. My first note and my last note. My last note is Ryan Gosling a bad actor? Proceed.
You like La La Land.
I do, but now I want to watch it again to like. I'm
He
really gonna
wasn't the best
study my
choice. I'm gonna
thoughts.
throw it out there. We're gonna do a La La Land
We will.
episode for sure because I love it, but I don't think he was the right choice for that one. You know what I think it is, and I'm not telling you how to feel. I think that Rachel McAdams is so strong in this movie that she outweighs. It's not that he was a bad choice, but I think that she outweighs like the strength of him in this couple. But I could see what you're saying. But I also think it wasn't one of those, like, yes, he was inserting himself in the situation to be like, you have to go out with me. But I do think that a lot of people meeting for the first time, physical attraction is the main intro. And we can talk about this because it's the month of love. Maybe people need some dating advice. Not that I'm the right person to give it, but I think it's like human nature to see someone for the first time and that's your first interest in maybe wanting to talk to them. Not saying that's for everyone, but I think for a lot of people, I agree the Ferris wheel scene did stress me out a little bit. But back to the theme that I'm going after for this is women making their own decisions, and she made her own decision. She did. Like, he is trying again to be like, hey, you promised to go out on a date. And she's basically embarrasses him in front of all his friends after work saying, I'm not going on a date with you. I don't know. But she's kind of like being flirty and playing off like, I'm sure you'll find a way if you really want to see me. And I don't know. I just feel like so many love stories of that era, whether it's in movies or things that people tell you, that's usually how it went, whether or not that's a good or bad thing. But I feel like in the end, she did end up making the decision for herself that she really liked him and she was charmed by him. Hopefully that changes your mind a little bit. Definitely an aggressive intro.
Well, speaking of aggressive, I think one of the other things that I really hated about this movie is that it very much glorified having a tumultuous relationship and having this really, I mean, like at times, like physically violent. And I don't know that if this movie was made today that they would have included that. I feel like that kind of sends mixed messages as to like what's acceptable. He doesn't hit her at all that I remember, but even her being physically aggressive toward him, I don't think that that's okay. And I felt like the way that they presented it in this movie was like, oh, they're so in love that they have to fight this much. I
No, I
felt
don't
like
think so.
it was like an irresponsible portrayal.
But like, really, what did it add to the movie at all by including that? They could have
Nothing.
easily been having arguments. I mean, verbal abuse is just as bad, but it wouldn't have taken away from their passion or their chemistry whatsoever by not having that included. And I don't think it was in a way to like draw awareness of that's wrong in couples. I actually think, to your point, it's kind of glorifying it, which I never thought about it that way. I think I overlooked it because of Noah's dad. It just tips the scales for me. The pancake breakfast, they're just trying to sneak in these abusive moments.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I was all in on their chemistry. I thought they were great together. I thought that they were having a lot of fun together, but I did not need that point of them saying like they were so in love and their relationship was better because they fought so often.
I think the other half of that quote in that scene is him saying like, but I want to do that because like I want you and I want to be together. And I think there's the balance of you're not supposed to not fight at all. And when you say the word fight, we're talking about having disagreements and working through challenges together, but not having either physical or verbal abuse as part of it. And I think to your point, they kind of just like gloss over it as and call it passion and love when it more so should be addressed. It seems like they worked it out and got into a better rhythm based on how they ended up and in their elder years. So maybe we only see them for 3 days when they have this affair again, but there wasn't really there's yelling, but there's no like physical altercations of what I remember. So I think like also not to blame it on young age, but I think in those moments people can become very passionate and irresponsible
Hmm.
that I would hope that they were able to like grow into a different couple as they got older and especially had kids and all these things. I mean, that's an important part that you bring up. I think it could be like super triggering for a lot of couples who may, be experiencing that in their own lives, and it shouldn't be glorified by any means. So, wow, I didn't know this was gonna get so deep.
Point Michelle. I'm going to leave some of these like nitpicks away from I'm not going to bring them up in this conversation, but I do have one plot hole that I'm not okay with. Did Allie never check the mail, like not
That's what
once
I
in an
wrote
entire
down.
year?
You could throw it on the other end that her parents are so over the top and controlling, which they are, that they were always like, we check the mail.
Okay.
But I hear you.
But
But I also think there are so many movies in this category that have similar level of this type of plot hole. That's like, you've got to be kidding me. This is so ridiculous.
I think that that is a completely logical explanation. That the parents knew that this was going on. They were going to keep their eye on it. And it was just an established thing that the parents get the mail. But why didn't she ever bother to write to him? Not one
I don't
letter.
know.
And he
I
doesn't
don't know.
question it either.
Yeah, I don't really have the answer for that. I think because of the way, and I think about this scene a lot in how it could have been interpreted either end, because put yourself in her position. They broke up the night before. She's like thrown out like we're leaving right now. So she goes and tells Finn like you have to tell him that I love him, and he's like no, it's over. Like it's over. He told me last night. So in her mind, she's thinking like it's over. So if he wants to write to me, he will. But like Finn is coming at it from like a quote unquote best friend perspective. If I had a phone, I obviously would have reached out to this person if I hadn't heard from them. But maybe she was like, he does not want to reach out to me. And maybe she just had a stronghold that she was like, if he wants to reach out to me, he will. So I think that she may have had false information because there's also a dialogue exchange, and I don't really trust Finn to be
You
communicating
don't
the right
trust Finn?
information. He's fine, but he's like a I don't know.
Distracted?
It could be one in near one. He could have said it in a different way. But when Noah comes back to the lumberyard, there's an exchange, but we don't hear what they say. So is he like, Allie, like this is such a guy thing. He would be like, Allie's parents made her go home. Like she came here and they left. But did he say like Allie said like she loves you and all these things? I mean, that didn't hinder anything on Noah's end because he ended up writing her a letter every day. I mean, he clearly was not over it. But I hear you. Like what's going on? Or also, again, they were 17. She ends up going to college. He moves to Atlanta, all these things. But they really didn't try and see each other.
No.
Not once,
I mean, they didn't have the internet, so I'm gonna
I guess.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
let that part slide, but she should have written him a letter. I'm not letting her off the hook for that.
Wow. Giving a point to Noah. This is a big step for you, Michelle. I mean, you have to give him that. He wrote her a letter a day and he reads Whitman.
The only point he gets is having a good dad.
Fair. I feel like I'm going to be coming off as judgmental, I'm saying this with a grain of salt. I am like very sensitive to sounds. Like, I don't like loud. Allie like screams way too much in this movie. Like she's like, I get it. She's excited. She's having a great summer. She's getting engaged. Just tone it down a little bit. Not that I'm saying she should do less. Like women should be able to have as many emotions as they want and do what they want. But I think that I would get annoyed if I was hanging out with her.
Before we move on to things we didn't like about Casablanca, one more thing. The whole Duke name, I get why they did it because they wanted it to be this reveal that it was them when they were older. But how quickly, as soon as that's revealed, that they stop calling him Duke and start calling him Mr.
Yeah, I don't know. So this is my understanding. Because he's reading her the story call like and Noah is in it, he can't really like introduce himself to her as Noah. He's trying to help her remember, but it may have like caused more confusion for her. And I think that he'd been doing that for so long that everyone in the nursing home like just refers to him as Duke.
Pulling the grandfather card again.
4. I feel like your things that you don't like about the movie holistically wouldn't make you hate the movie because you like a lot of the aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
But because you're so annoyed by Ryan Gosling, that could definitely ruin a movie for you.
It may have ruined all movies that he's in. I don't know. Time will tell.
I don't really have like passionate feelings. Like I think he's a good actor. He's not my favorite, but does the job.
I do think that she could have been happier either way. I mean, I think that
I don't know.
could still have been happy with Lon.
I think she could have, but she says that line that's very important that she says, I feel like one person with you and one completely different person with Noah. And I feel like she's just more free. Like, I know it's such like a silly, like it's the expectation of this is who I'm supposed to be and this is who I am.
Mm-hmm. I
Like,
get that.
I don't paint anymore. I don't do like Lon is like the safe decision.
He's
like,
from the safe worlds, the world where she
Yes.
can't do any of those things. So he kind of like loses points off the
Yeah.
bat. Yeah,
But at the
by
same
association.
time, like that's really from her parents. Like he was a very supportive partner. Like he's like, all right, so paint, like do whatever you want. Like, but I don't know. We didn't really see a lot of their relationship. We just see the montage of them going out and going dancing and have all these funs. But like, what was she doing on a day-to-day basis? Like, was he just like, I am the man of the house and I'll make money and support us? Like, you don't need to do anything, but never maybe really didn't ask her what she wanted and what was important to her and what her dreams were. So that's another question mark of things we don't see. You can't see Michelle's face right now, but I think I'm doing a good job.
I mean, I think that you put in a good effort, but I'm not completely
Why don't you
swayed.
watch it like one more time in a couple
I don't
months?
want to. Give me some time. Maybe like with you, I would consider watching it again.
Okay, that's fair. And we'll dress up in cool hats.
Yes,
We'll wear Allie-inspired outfits.
that would help.
Okay, so what didn't you like? I'm sure your list isn't very long, so.
It's not very long, but in alignment with what we talked about last week in the Sabrina episode, it really bothers me that Ilsa has the line where she says, I can't think anymore. Like, you'll have to think for both of us. Like, you'll have to make the decision for both of us. It felt very like, oh, I'm a woman and therefore I can't handle such a decision.
And it's the opposite because the whole movie, she's the one making these really difficult decisions and she's such a strong
She is.
character and doesn't need, I mean, in a way she's like relying on Rick to help her get out of this insane circumstance. But yeah, I think this kind of plays into it, which is probably very polarizing because it's the most famous line in the film, but I hate the fact that he calls her kid. Like,
Same.
It's just like oh my God. I feel like it's like set the tone for so many males to call women kids too and make it like a term of endearment. Like
It's
I
not.
very much remember being in high school and guys calling girls kids, like, hey kid. And I'm like,
It's demeaning. It's not cute.
that is not cute. It is not a good look. So
Yeah.
I am, that is definitely not on my favorite line list. A little sneak peek. At the beginning, and this was more so my thought, which is obviously like the most important part of the movie, just the aspects of it being during World War II and understanding the politics and where everyone kind of lies. But it took me a little bit to catch up the first time I watched it. And again, this isn't something that I dislike, but it was just something that made me. I sound so unintelligent saying this, but I genuinely like needed to sit with it the first time I saw it and was trying to understand how everyone was connected and where like the state of politics was at that time and how they fell into the story. And I felt like the second time through, like I had a complete understanding of it and it all made sense to me.
No, I am in complete alignment with you, but I'll bring it a step further and say that I feel like even though I've seen this movie now so many times and so many times recently, it's still like there's so much to understand and there are so many of these side characters. And I think the fact that a lot of them have accents, again, like not to like this makes me sound bad to say this, but I have been so confused at certain points, but I think that's part of the reason why I've loved watching it again and again, because every time I watch it, I like understand it a little bit more. And I think when you have a better understanding of it, or hopefully one day a full understanding of it, you just realize like how good it is.
Yeah. I didn't say this in the earlier section, but I love the idea. Obviously, Rick's is the main setting for most of this movie, but the idea that Casablanca is this kind of safe melting pot of people from all different countries and coming together and just stopping time for a second and drinking champagne and gambling, dancing, and the police commissioner at one point says to Ilsa, "How did you sleep?" And she says, "Oh, I slept fine." And he's like, "Oh, people don't like rarely sleep in Casablanca." And I just thought that that spoke volumes to how I would imagine it to be during that time period. Everyone just partying and everything is very full of life and people from all different places like coming together, which I thought was kind of a cool concept, especially for a movie that came out during this time period.
This is more of what I like, but I agree that I love that concept of like the world is crumbling down, yet humans still have this capacity to come together and find a reason to be jovial. I don't want to use the word celebrate, but kind of like find comfort in hanging out together.
Let's go back to the Notebook. And I want you to give me your favorite line and your favorite scene. And it's okay if they overlap, which you kind of hinted at earlier, but hopefully
Yeah.
you can play a clip for our listeners.
Favorite scene is absolutely the scene where Allie rides her bike and shows up at Noah's house and meets Noah's dad for the first time. It's completely charming. I love the idea of staying up late in the summer. I love the idea of eating breakfast at 10 p.m. I'm all in on that, eating pancakes. We said so many good things about Noah's dad in this episode, so I don't need to repeat myself. Because I am realizing that I did not write down a favorite line. I only wrote down one line, but it's one that I hated. So in the spirit of this, I'll share the line that I hated the most. And it was from the beginning, and this just kind of speaks to really why I did not like Noah. He said his explanation for pursuing Allie was, when I see something that I like, I go crazy. And my response to that was like, okay, that's your problem. Why are you putting that on her?
So funny. I like interpreted this so different. I guess because I just watched it so young growing up that I just had like a complete different experience with it. I feel like I'm going to look at this movie so differently
Sorry.
now. My favorite scene, the part, just because it's so satisfying how she walks into this, but when he goes out to get breakfast and she wakes up and he leads her to the paint room with overlooking the river, and she just walks in and there's just like all her paint supplies laid out, and she looks like so like shocked but just so content in that moment, and then she just spends the morning painting in the nude, and I just felt like it was probably just such like a amazing moment for her to be able to just sit in silence and do this thing that's makes her so happy. And I really, again, I love the scenes with her mom because I think that they're so powerful. Yeah, I actually get emotional during most of them every single time. So the scene where she's, yelling at her in the office and then how it ends up of them going to the yard together, I think was so strong. Favorite lines, I don't really have a specific one. Actually, this is kind of the anti version of the one that you just said because it is part of this conversation. But I just love the way that how Allie responds to that. And he's like, you should cut those in. But he says, like, I can be smart, funny, all these things. So I think is cute. I thought it was cute. And she just goes, you're dumb. And he goes, I can be that. And I just thought that was cute.
Okay, I like that.
And then I like some of the other, these are just tiny ones I wrote down, but in the beginning when Duke is like going to get his medicine and he asks the guy like how's it going? Like when they're online at the nursing home, and he says like, I keep trying to die, but they won't let me.
That does sound like something that Pop-Up would say.
Yeah. Or after they go on their first date, I thought it was really cute that Finn says, do you guys love each other?
Oh.
You do love each other. And I just thought that was sweet.
I do like Finn, and I like Kevin Connolly, that actor.
Yeah. Yeah. He's great. He's great for that role.
Yes, well cast.
Okay.
Casablanca. Favorite scene, favorite line.
Why don't you go first?
Okay. My favorite scene, it's not very grand, but I think the scene where Ilsa, Laszlo, and Rick meet for the first time, the three of them, where they're going to sit at the table and he for the first time says, I'll sit with them and have a drink. Just like the moment of the three of them meeting, that tension, I really enjoyed it because it was like at that point the audience has most of the information but not all of the information, but like that there's history between them, even though we don't, I think at that point, like don't know exactly what has happened between them. And we know that Laszlo is this like really important figure in the movement. And this is going to be a big deal that these three characters are coming together, but like we don't have all the information yet.
That night when she walks in is such like a intense scene. Mine is the lead up of their relationship. So I really loved, again, another montage, but them having this cute little life together in Paris, but specifically the scene where they're out dancing and just having this really romantic evening together and holding each other in their arms. What about favorite line for you?
I don't know that I have a complete favorite line. I guess of the like one of the iconic ones, I think of all the gin joints, I do think that's like a really good line. But other than that, every line that I wrote down all came from Louis. I think that he was given the most. Rewatching it this time, I think it like cemented it that he is, other than Victor, my favorite character.
Love Louis.
I'm just trying to look at all of them if I had to pick from these. I think I like when he says, I'd like to think you killed a man. It's the romantic in me.
I think that if Casablanca wasn't Casablanca and it was just like a movie I was watching, I would like the gin quote, but I've just heard it so many times before I saw the movie. And that's the same with Here's Looking at You, Kid, aside from how problematic that quote is. It's like too overplayed before I could even like form my own opinion about it. So one of my favorite ones that I thought was really funny was like, make it 10. I'm only a poor, corrupt official.
I wrote that one down too.
He says, drinking during the day, you've become such a Frenchman. And then he says, when he needs to send everyone home and break up the bar, he says, "I'm shocked to know that gambling is going on." And someone walks by and goes, "You're winning, sir." And he goes, "Oh, thank you." Again, we've talked so much about Rick's cynicism, but like when I think her name is Yvette, I may be
No, I
butchering it
think you're
because I was
right.
but she says like, "Where were you last night?" And he's like, "I can't remember that far back." And she's like, "What are you doing tonight?" And he's like, "I don't make plans that far in advance." He has no fear of like anyone around him. Like he just says whatever he wants when the head of the Reich is like going through everything he knows about him, and he's like, "Are my eyes really brown?"
I loved that part too.
Definitely a strong script. Okay, let's get into the food section. Tell me what you really wanted to eat or drink from both of these movies.
Not a ton of food content, but Casablanca, it's just free flowing champagne from beginning to end. I don't ever see anyone eating anything. At one point, when Laszlo and Ilsa first get there, he does order something different. I think he orders like Cointreau for both of them, but like they never get to drink it because someone brings it and he's like, "No, let's pour champagne." So it's a very pro champagne movie, which I appreciate as a champagne drinker. So that's my easy answer for that
I feel
movie.
like they needed some caviar, just caviar on
Someone,
toast.
I
Like
think
a,
the Third Reich leader guy, has some caviar with his champagne.
of course he does. Save it
Hate
for the
that
rest of
guy.
us. The worst. Yeah. And I feel like the champagne they were drinking was really good champagne.
There was one mention of Veuve Clicquot 1926.
I need a bottle of that. Next podcast episode, we're getting a bottle. I just wanted a bottle of champagne. I wanted like a martini, a dirty martini, a cigarette as my main course, and then I wanted to end the night with champagne
I think that's all they serve
and
there.
just a
So,
cup of caviar. Yeah, maybe a game of roulette thrown in there too.
how about the Notebook?
Breakfast. I just
Pancakes at
want
10
to be
p.m.
sitting at. I didn't. I think that they did eat at other parts of it, but I actually don't know what they were eating. But yeah, I also just wanted to like be out at that club that Lon proposed to Allie at because it looked so fun, and I wanted to be drinking like a fruity cocktail and wearing flower in my hair and all white.
And there was the scene where they went to the movies and they were eating popcorn that immediately I was like, I want specifically movie theater popcorn. It's different.
So, but speaking of popcorn, so we're recording this on February 15th, and Dom and I went to go see this documentary that is nominated for the Oscars called Fire of Love, which I feel like it's not a Valentine's Day movie, but we did see it on Valentine's Day. And it was like a movie promotion, so they gave you like free popcorn as part of it, and it was in one of those like old time boxes, and I felt very Allie Hamilton in that moment. I think that we should get to our dinner party scene. We'll keep the structure of this season alive with picking one person from each film and making them go on a date. I can't remember who you might have picked last
It's
time.
your turn.
Finn and Louis. Another male matchup. What do
Okay.
we think?
I'm
I'm
in.
liking this.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like this will be fun.
This will be really fun.
Okay. Are they I guess they're both these are both taking place in the
Yeah.
40s.
No time travel required.
No time travel required. There won't be the clothing will be on brand. No more white suits or maybe white suits, but like David was out of place last week. They will both be in place. But one is in Europe and one is in the US. So we have to find a place where they're going to be having the state.
Where was Finn when he
Perished.
yeah. Was he not in
Um,
Europe when that happened?
he was in Europe, so maybe he has like a day off while
And
he's in war, and him. Let's say that he's in Casablanca. He had like a a day off and he went to explore. He was like, you know what? I'm getting out of here and I'm going to Casablanca. What if it's at Parrots?
I
It's
was
like competing bar. Maybe they're competing because they actually serve food there. We're not totally sure. What do you think they're ordering? I don't think that they had set Valentine's Day menus in the 40s. I think that they just had, it was like, this is our menu. We have 5 items on it. I think that they definitely are going to start off with some champagne, although I don't know if Finn is a champagne drinker.
I don't think he is.
I think he would just want like a rum and Coke.
Yeah, or like a scotch and soda, like some kind of like
Scotch and soda.
soda and
Yeah.
liquor
He's like, can I
combo.
actually just have like a Coca-Cola in like a glass bottle? Like I feel
Yeah.
like that's what he was drinking. Food wise, I don't know what they serve at the Parrot.
I know you said Finn was on his day off, but because we only see Louis in his uniform, I'm picturing them both like in uniform. So maybe, I don't know if this happened as much in the 40s since there were more people in the service, but maybe it could be one of those situations where like another table pays for their meal as like a thank you for your
Yes.
service, even though Louis is not I mean, he's a police officer, so he's not, in the army per se, but
Yeah.
he's still a public servant. Would it be maybe something like traditional to, like, do we think that they're serving American fare or do we think that they're serving more
No.
like
I think that they're
Moroccan?
serving, let's look it up.
How about some
What?
like lamb and couscous?
Sounds pretty good. I think that Louis would order some caviar to the table though.
Yeah.
And Finn is like, I've never had caviar in my life. And I will just stick to my Coca-Cola. Like I could see him like just scoping out the women in the bar and not caring too much about the food.
I think that he would try the caviar, but I think that he would be one of those people like kind of like Tom Hanks in Big, where he's kind of like, ugh, this is gross.
All right, I like the lamb and couscous. We got some caviar. We got some champagne. I
One bottle
feel
of Coke.
1 bottle of Coke. I feel like he drinks a lot of soda. I could see him having like 3 bottles of
Yeah,
Coke.
you're right.
I don't think they're having dessert. I
What?
feel like neither of them have are dessert people.
No. Yeah, I agree.
Like I think they're just capping off with another round.
And I feel like Finn stumbled into this situation on his day off and pretty quickly is ready to move on to the next thing. I don't see him being like invested in this situation. And I think that Louis is there kind of for the wrong reasons too. I think he's like there to scheme, to collect money on a bet.
I think he's trying to convince him to get a visa to Casablanca so he can get out of the war, even though that wouldn't work. But he's like trying to convince him why Casablanca is the place and show him a good time.
So neither of them are there for the right intentions.
No. I think that Finn is getting a little drunk and probably getting
Office
fancy
cokes.
with some office cokes with some parrot ladies.
Yeah.
With Yvette.
I could
I could
that is
see an
absolutely what
Yvette Finn
happens.
moment because
Yes.
she was well, she was going after the other side and dating a German for a little bit, but this is Valentine's Day weekend and she needs some American tender loving care.
Yeah, he would definitely like her.
All right, Michelle. So we have one episode left of this very special series, which I am heartbroken about. Pun intended.
Heartbroken.
Heartbroken. What are we covering on our last episode?
For our last matchmaking episode, we'll be watching How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days and 10 Things I Hate About You.
10 out of 10 movies.
Yes.
We'll get into it.
See you next week.